Hey, I'm back after an extended absence from making videos. And as you can tell from my wound on my head, which I'm trying to not pay attention to, I just got through 12 surgeries in the last 14 months, but I'm not letting that stop. I have a new friend, and it's always great to have a new friend. And what's interesting is when you meet somebody that's the new friend, after you talk to them for a few minutes, you realize, wow, this is just like an old friend. What's the only difference is chronological. It's like minutes feel like decades. Or sometimes you meet people and you go, someplace in the past, wherever that was at, um, there's an energy there that I recognize. And for those of you who watched my videos on my near-death experiences, where I talked about my third near-death experience in India, I go back to India and this thing happens, and I'm brought back to life on the operating table, heart surgery. I was shown these pictures of all these faces of people that if I didn't come back, these people would not connect with me for whatever they needed or whatever they were going to add to the world or whatever. And I periodically run into one of those faces. So I'll just let that go. I met Anastasia just yesterday. So talk about a long time friendship, and watched her interview on near-death experiences. And I went to her TikTok channel, as they call it, a channel. And I discovered that there's a lot of things that she's into that I think friends of mine would be interested in exploring. And we don't see eye to eye on absolutely everything. But to me, I don't even see eye to eye with me 5 years ago or last year, or certainly when I was in my 40s or 30s or 20s. So our truce, and Anastasia appreciates this because I've watched her videos, and it's like she's changed her belief system and what she believes to be true is an evolving thing. It's not set in pace. It's not in stone. It's not in a package, nice and neat, but it seems to be evolving. Tell me if I'm wrong on that, but that's the way I pictured it. So she's had a near-death experience, which some people would say, I'm looking at that. That's more of a spiritual and enlightening experience. It doesn't matter. Label it anything you want. We're going to call it an NDE. And I'm going to let her explain, and I'm going to kind of stay off the screen mostly, but and I'm going to answer her or ask her a couple of questions later on, if needed. I got a feeling that she's going to be complete upon herself. So Anastasia, I'm giving you the stage. If you could start off, kind of tell us a little bit about your background briefly, and what was this event that happened, how it changed your life, et cetera, which is really where the story's at. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Bill. And thank you so much for having me on here. I agree that when we find these connections, we just kind of feel something, and I appreciate the chance to connect with you. And, who knows where this relationship go, this one-day-year-old relationship. So back in 2019, I had an experience that absolutely changed me forever. I was in a dentist's office having a rather invasive procedure, and I'd never had anything like this done before. They had to put me under nitrous oxide. And I've told the story on other channels, so if you've seen this before, you've heard this part of the story. But what happened as I was sitting there, as the dentist was preparing me, I was having these really unusual physical experiences. And every time I would breathe in, it would feel like my body was lifting up above, and then I was falling back in. And I would lift up and fall back in. And it seemed like the time was going so slow at this point, and I was not aware what the sensation was. I've never had this experience before. So I was really conflicted. Do I say something, or do I just allow it to unfold? Is this normal, or is this something I should be worried about? And it seemed like with each breath, I was separating more and more. There was this feeling of tension building up, like a pressure. And at one point, I finally thought, you know what? Enough is enough. I need to say something, because something is clearly just not right here. It doesn't feel right. It's starting to even get to the point where the pressure feels like it's limiting my breathing. And all of a sudden, the best I could describe it is I pop. And I'm no longer in the seat looking up at the ceiling, but I'm now in the ceiling looking down at my physical body. And this begins a story that I tell, like one thing happens after another, but in reality, it all feels like it happened at one time. It's as if time from this moment on doesn't exist the same way it does in our physical body. And the first thing I thought, which just gave me this huge epiphany, was, what am I doing up here? And I found it immediately fascinating in that moment that I said, what am I doing up here? Meaning, I wasn't identifying with the body down in the dentist chair. I was identifying with the something that was up in the ceiling looking down. I wasn't identifying with my physical body, and I didn't even know what it was that I would call myself at that point. But my next thought was, am I dead? And with that thought, it's like my body flipped upside down, and I was inches away from the ceiling in the dentist's office. Now, if you have ever had a moment anytime in your life where you have been overwhelmed with beauty, overwhelmed with something that was so awe-inspiring, that's what happened in this moment. I was inches away from the ceiling, and I found all of the cracks and the crevices and all the little indents of the ceiling to be the most miraculous, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And it sounds so silly to say that because it was just the ceiling, but it was like I had seen it for the first time, like with the eyes of a child. And all the detail was blown up like a microscope. So it wasn't just that I was seeing the ceiling from a distance. It was like I was looking at the very fabric of the ceiling. I could see it both from the surface, but it was like I was able to see inside of it as well. And so this was just, it was absolutely captivating. I felt like I could have actually just stayed right there staring at the ceiling for eternity because I just found it so fascinating. But instantly after I flipped over, I was gone. I was no longer in the dentist chair. And I opened up my eyes, and I realized that we're not a physical body at that point, but that's the best way I can explain it. It was like an aperture closed and then an aperture opened. And I found myself in this immense, indescribable oneness, love, comfort, bliss. Throw any word at it you could possibly imagine to describe the most amazing feeling of contentment and peace and being loved that you could ever imagine feeling. And that is where I was. And yet, as I, with my eyes open, was looking, I was in what I would call a void. And so there was nothing there, but yet it was like there was everything there, everything that could have ever existed ever through all eternity felt like it existed in this place. Now I have since this experience, because it's been a couple of years, have grown to call this place the oneness, because what I felt there was a connection to absolutely everything. Every person, every soul, if we want to use that word, everything that has ever existed through all eternity, I felt a connection to. And just like when I was in the dentist office, in this place, there was no time. There was only a sense of knowingness and a sense of awe and curiosity. Now, since my experience, I obviously, like so many people that have had, these really profound experiences, it takes a lifetime to put words to it. And one of the things I love about telling my story is every time I tell it, I feel like I find a new word or a new comparison, or in conversation, I get asked a question and I get a new way of describing it. It's like being inside a prism where you are every light that's ever existed, every color, but yet you can recognize yourself as being your own individual color. So you're part of this whole, you're part of this rainbow, this beautiful, never-ending light, but yet you feel like you have your own individual part in that light. You have your own color. You have your own way of reflecting that light through the experiences that you take, whether it's in a physical life like we have here, or in other experiences that your soul may be having in other worlds. And in that moment, I had this connection of feeling. Now, I felt like I was taking in everything. I was taking in everything that had ever been known. And it was going so fast that I couldn't formulate a question. And I wasn't even actually trying to formulate a question, because the best way I can describe this is when we're here in the physical body, we have a thought process. We can think this, and then this, and then this, and then we might come to a conclusion. And even if we come to a conclusion that we feel really, really confident about, we may still have some part of us that wonders, is that really right? Is that correct? In this place, none of that existed. There was no thought process. There was no trying to understand something. There was no taking in information and trying to compare it to something else. The best way I can explain it is it's just pure knowing. It is absolute, unadulterated truth that exists. And it expands constantly. It was as if, even if I were to get to the edge of it, it would get bigger in that moment, because the knowing was never ending. It was infinite in nature. And if I tried to form a question, I couldn't, because a question in that place would infer that something wasn't known, which wouldn't have been possible, because there, absolutely everything was known. So it was more like being curious about something. And then that curiosity almost acted like a GPS beacon, and it took you right to that knowing instantly. And you knew it was right. There was no question. It was undeniable. There couldn't be anything but truth in that place. So it was like I was taking in all of this understanding in a way and at a speed that our physical brains could never comprehend. And there was a joy that came with this knowing. It was a joy because, in some respects, when I think back on this whole experience, there was a part of me that felt like I was still very much aware of the feelings of my physical life. I had the feelings of connections, of relationships, of things that I had always wanted to understand. But in this place, I was getting them all understood instantly. I knew exactly why everything was happening the way it was happening. I knew exactly why my physical life was exactly the way it was. And I understood without a doubt, and this is one of the things that gets me in the most trouble when I share it publicly, because it gets me, I can't give enough information to explain why this is yet. Maybe one day I will. But there is no good or bad as it relates to our soul. Our soul is absolutely 100% complete. What we experience in this physical life, we can call things good, we can call things bad, but those are relative to our physical experience. It's relative to how something feels good to us physically, or how something feels painful to us physically. But on the soul level, everything is all one. Everything is exactly the way it is meant to be. And there is no lack. There is nothing that we could do to make us at that level any more worthy, any more complete, or on the other hand, any less worthy or any less complete. And so with that no good or bad, it was also really clear to me that from the soul perspective, there are no lessons to learn in this life. Now, I say that, and I could probably spend an entire hour explaining what I mean by this, because in here, I know exactly what it means. But if you're listening to this and you've been wronged, or you've had something done to you that has not been just, you can absolutely say, people definitely have lessons to learn in this life, because there are people screwing up left and right. But from the soul perspective, if we look at the physical life as providing the value and justification to the soul, we have it backward. It's actually the beauty and the radiance and the love of the soul that provides the value to the physical life from that perspective. So the more we live through that soul connection, and I use the word soul very loosely. I realize the soul is a limiting word, and some people may have other words that they use for that part of us that isn't the physical body. But I'll use the word soul just for this conversation. That the soul is what brings everything into this physical life that we call loving, that we feel that completion. We feel that something underneath the surface that is whole and complete. That's that part of us. And while we can live our life here in the physical life, and we do things that are looked at as being loving or looked at as being hateful, those are physical experiences of the physical body. The soul simply is having a physical experience in this body. If we think about the body more like a vehicle that the soul steps into and then is able to move around by using the physical body, that's the most accurate way I can describe what that feels like. Now, what was so interesting about this place, and I have yet to really find the right words to describe this part, it was as if I could see through the eyes of everything that had ever lived through all time and all types of experiences. And with that came an immediate understanding that every single soul is all in different places at different times, but we all come back to that oneness. We all come back to that place, absolutely complete, connected. And this part's a little bit tricky to kind of describe. It's all tricky to describe. What am I saying? It's all hard to describe, but this part in particular is really difficult because it felt as if any one of those souls, if they didn't exist for any reason, that entire oneness, that place where I was, that completion also couldn't exist. So if you think about the smallest insect or the tiniest blade of grass, if that didn't exist, that entire oneness also could not exist because it's all integral to the entire whole. There isn't one soul that's worth more than another or one that's more valuable or more important. It's all absolutely vital to the whole, to this part that we're all connected to. And I've had times where I've been able to kind of get back into that place a little bit more since then. But it is as if every experience we have here in our physical body, what you and I are doing right now, this conversation, everybody who's listening to this conversation, everybody who shares this conversation and talks about it with somebody else, all of that experience is shared kind of like real time, if you will, up into that experience of oneness. So this is all part of it. This is adding to it. This is the infinitely expanding nature of the oneness. All these experiences that we have in our physical bodies are all adding to that oneness that I connected to. And so if we didn't have this experience right now, that entire oneness couldn't exist either. So when you think about things like, okay, is there fate? Is there destiny? Yes, but no, and we can talk about that more later. But what I will say is that everything is happening exactly the way it needs to happen right now. And that's the most important thing. Now, I felt this overwhelming enthusiasm, is the best word, of what I was taking in. And immediately I was brought right back into my body. And there was this moment where I very much felt like I had a foot in two worlds. I was back in my physical body, looking through my physical eyes. I saw the dentist with a concerned look on his face hovering over me. And he was talking, and yet I could care less what he was saying, because all I wanted to do was to go back to this place that I was just at. I wanted so desperately to not lose this connection, because it felt like, again, using the camera aperture, it felt like it was the something that was closing down, and this connection that I was intimately one with was becoming separate, like it was a door that was closing. And before the door closed, there was this just undeniable one thing that I knew I could not forget, no matter what, no matter how much that grains of sand were slipping through my fingers. And that is that the physical body is like a sensory tool for the soul. The physical body collects all of the sensory information of what it's like to have this physical experience, because that is why the soul is here in the physical body, is to understand through the physical sensations what it is like to be in a physical body. Because ultimately, our souls are very creative beings, and we want to create in the physical. We want to bring our full selves, our complete soul connection into the physical body, and create from the soul level in the physical experience. And the more we can connect to our soul, to that quiet part of us, to that part that's connected to that infinite, all-knowing oneness. Some people call it a higher self, some people call it God, source, nirvana. All of those words, they all apply. It is why, from what I brought back and from my experience, and I want to make sure I'm really clear, this is just my one experience. Why we are here is because our souls want to have this physical experience. And so we are all walking this earth right now because we all want to be, because at a level that maybe we don't necessarily have conscious awareness of while we're in the physical body, that part of us wants to have this experience, wants to understand what it is like to hug somebody and feel that warmth of a hug, to run down the street and feel wind in your hair. All the physical sensations are part of this experience, and they are meant to be part of the experience. And they are all absolutely complete, and they are exactly as they need to be.
Wow. I wish I had set this up better, because I got this little message coming on the Zoom screen here saying I got 2 minutes or I got to upgrade. I've never seen that before. So, but we will have another conversation. And I'm glad that you shared this. And no matter how many NDE people I talk to, and I've had 3, nobody's story is the same. But everybody comes away with the same message. It's all about love. So, and I don't want to cut you short. So if you got about a minute here or so, something you want to leave us with, something you think would a gift for all of us, what thought would you like to leave with us?
If at the end of the day, you're looking for your path in life, because it seems like the physical life is unknown, trying, you feel stuck, quiet your mind, quiet your heart, and simply ask yourself, if you could feel the best you could possibly feel right now, what would that be? And allow your soul to speak to you, because it will guide you towards those things that ultimately you are looking to experience in this physical life. And if you can follow that path like flow of a river, you will find yourself intuitively being guided into the things that will bring you exactly to what your soul wants to experience.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna have a further conversation with you, so don't go away. We gotta finish this recording, and then I'll get back to you. But thank you for sharing your time with me this morning. God bless.
Absolutely.